Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'll be tonight's host. And tonight we have a very interesting guest with us, Lynn Tabersack, who is the Public Issues Specialist for Climate Change for the Connecticut League of Women Voters. Lynn, tell us a little bit about what exactly your duties are as this.
Well, thank you for wearing a green shirt today,
Okay.
Dave. It's near and dear to the topic this evening. The Connecticut League actually recruits members who will develop expertise in specific policy areas. And we're interested in government and elections, of course, social policy. But I am a climate change specialist under natural resources. So during the legislative session, I'll be following bills, tracking bills that have to do with climate change. I'll be testifying at public hearings. I might have to write letters to the editor. Obviously, I report to the Connecticut League's board once a month and have action alerts when we think we need 2,000 voices to be heard on a special issue. So that's what I do, and of course as a result I also go on public access programs like this one to talk about climate change. It's such an important issue.
Well, it's important to note for our audience that, you know, as they probably know, the League of Women Voters is a very nonpartisan group. They're scrupulously nonpartisan in terms of dealing with public issues or political parties. What exactly is Connecticut doing about climate change and global warming and things of that nature?
Well, we have good news and we have bad news. I think Connecticut, like California, has been in the vanguard of addressing the issue of greenhouse gas emissions, so that I think it was in 2001 Connecticut joined a compact with the governors of many New England states, mid-Atlantic states, and actually some of the provinces of eastern Canada.
Yes.
And they all agreed to try to limit greenhouse gas emissions and to create a regional registry so that we would know how much greenhouse gas was actually going into the atmosphere from our particular area. So that was the beginning of our work, and I have to say that that early work was voluntary. People did it because they had a goodwill and they went into it. In 2005, I believe, 11 of the states in the compact decided to plan a cap-and-trade program.
Like we're hearing about in Washington nowadays.
Like we're hearing about. I can't believe it.
Excellent.
11 states took action before our federal government did. I think we had to have a change in administration to see a cap-and-trade, to see it even spoken about in Washington. So that we developed a cap-and-trade program for our region in 2005, and in fact, polluters, power plants,
yes.
plants that generate electricity, have to purchase an allowance or a credit, one credit, for every ton of CO2 or greenhouse gas that they emit. And I want you to think, I don't want people to be horrified, but we have, for these 11 states, our annual limit of greenhouse gases is 188 million tons.
Seems like a lot of that's actual weight of the substance and before it's mixed in with the air.
It is, and that's what's trapping heat and raising the temperature of our planet. But so we got into this program. We call it RGGI. It's the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. The first auction where power producers actually got to or had to buy their allowances was in September of 2008, and I think in that sale, and there's been one every 3 months since then, that we generated almost $28 million for Connecticut to invest in energy conservation, energy efficiency, and renewable energy, which, as you know, doesn't create a greenhouse gas.
So Connecticut's been on the positive end of on the receiving end of these funds rather than on the giving end. Some of the other states, I presume, are paying that money into the fund which is coming to Connecticut.
Well, no, states don't pay in, polluters pay in.
Right.
Large power companies, they buy the allowances, and our state has decided in statute how it's going to be spent, and I think they've made a wise decision in directing it to be in conservation, energy efficiency, and in renewable energy, energy that doesn't create greenhouse gases.
So it doesn't go into the general fund then?
No, it doesn't. It goes into the Clean Energy
wonderful.
Fund. Don't say wonderful. We're not safe yet.
Okay.
Now, there is bad news for Connecticut in terms of climate, too. And I have to say that we have the worst air quality of any state in New England. And the entire state is called non-attainment in terms of ozone by the National Ambient Air Quality Standard Board. So we have problems there. And there are at least 15 days each year in Connecticut in some areas where the air is unhealthy to breathe. We can't be proud of that. And there are an additional 64 days when the air is only moderately good to breathe. So right now, most of our climate change emphasis has been on power plants and on getting them to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, but we obviously have a lot more to do in our state. We're in the vanguard, but we're not done. We're not there yet. It's not healthy for people.
What can we as citizens do? Everything we know is bottom-up, grassroots. What can citizens do in order to affect? Well, maybe before I go into that, I'm presuming we talked about. You mentioned that it's only the power plants that we're looking at this point. I'm presuming that a lot of that ozone that we're talking about, aside from that, comes from automobiles?
That's right. We feel that about 40% of the CO2 in the atmosphere in our area comes from power plants, but another 40% comes from tailpipes. It comes from transportation, and we haven't addressed that yet. And maybe we'll talk about that a little later, because there's a lot to do in that area. And now, with the EPA recognizing, well, it hasn't ruled yet, with the EPA suggesting that it's not just stationary pollution that's our problem, but it's motor vehicles and it's tailpipe emissions that are trapping the heat around our planet.
Okay. Now, what, as I alluded to earlier, what can we citizens do? What active involvement can we have in making our state a healthier one?
Well, there are lots of things you can do. We need to all try to consume less energy, and that's for starts. And I encourage people now, because there are stimulus funds in the state from Washington, to call their utility company and to request an energy audit. They cost $75 to complete. You get about $300 worth of service and lots of advice on how you can use less energy in your home, whether it's by better insulation, different lighting. It's a very thorough job. If you're on energy assistance, there's no charge for the audit, so I want to encourage those people to request an audit too. But
who would qualify for energy assistance? Who would we reach out to let know about that?
It's income-based. I would certainly hope that the Community Action Committee of Danbury was telling people about it, the Department of Social Services, the Department of Elderly Services. A lot of our seniors are really struggling to pay these horrible utility bills. So have an energy audit done. It will be worth it to you in the end. You can also replace your light bulbs. Use the compact fluorescent bulbs. I'm told that they save about $37 over the life use of the bulb. So multiply that by the number of fixtures that you have in your house.
Yeah, they're a little more expensive to begin with, though, but
yes,
they last, I think, from what I've heard, 4 or 5 years, which is certainly longer than any light bulb that I've ever owned.
Turn out lights. My husband and I each nag each other. Turn out the lights. When you leave a room, there's no reason for that light to be on. Unplug computers. Dry laundry outside. Really, I think national experts say that if each of us just conserved as much as we could, that we'd reduce electric energy use by 30% without putting a single new power plant online, without creating a new nuclear power plant, that if we all take conservation very seriously, that we can reduce energy usage by 30% just with conservation alone. And I tell people, when an appliance wears out, look for the Energy Star appliance. Make those kind of smart purchases so that in the future you'll be saving money in that way.
You mentioned a moment ago about drying clothes outside. When you say that, do you mean use those newfangled solar-powered dryers that we have available to us now?
Yes.
Called clotheslines?
It's called clotheslines, and it's ambient air. And it was one of the defeats of this session of the legislature. We had a right-to-dry bill that was not successful. So not everyone has a right to dry their clothes.
There are probably, and I can vouch for
common interest communities.
Yeah, as a realtor, I can vouch for there are a lot of neighborhoods, both single-family neighborhoods that have common interest, and also certainly condominiums that have regulations that prohibit clotheslines.
Nobody wants to see your drawers up that close.
Well, but at what cost, though,
Yes,
I guess.
Yeah.
But you had also mentioned about appliances, dryers, washers, refrigerators, stoves.
Dehumidifiers, almost everything
okay.
that you can buy, you want to look for that Energy Star rating on it. They've been approved for use, they save energy, and it helps us with our greenhouse gas emissions. We reduce emissions.
It seems like those are the appliances that in fact probably use the bulk of our electric usage. And interestingly enough, you know, I have one of the condos that I own and I've rented out. I have a gas dryer, and it's got natural gas in the neighborhood, and we chose a gas dryer. And for some reason, natural gas in a dryer, somehow or other, is much more efficient economically, energy usage, than an electric dryer. I don't know why that is. I don't know the scientific principle behind that, but my tenants have always talked about how they're saving like $30 a month over what they've seen in other places normally for normal electric usage in terms of dollars spent for a dryer.
A real killer in our area, you must know, is air conditioning, and that puts a big drain on the system, and it's what we call at peak demand time. When it's daytime, when the sun is out, people walk over to their AC and they go flip, and all of a sudden we are using kilowatt after kilowatt of power to keep people cool. So that's something. I know that we have an air conditioner that we had CLMP, because they're our utility, come out and they put on a special device that will reduce our air conditioning if there is a great demand for power on the grid. And they sent us a $50 check for allowing them to install this device on our air conditioning.
I've seen some of the newer air conditioners, newer wall or window air conditioners, and I'm hearing that they're incredibly efficient in terms of electric usage and cooling capacity versus older ones, and maybe those were the one of the things that would make a huge, and they're not very expensive either. They're, you know, it's a very you make the money, you make your expenditure back for them very quickly.
Yeah, some people need air conditioning because of their health conditions. I think we can do with less. I remember growing up in Danbury where on a summer day you drew all the shades, you had the house dark, and it was really cool enough. So maybe we're overdoing that, but you know, some people do need it. It's convenient. Lots of workplaces need it.
Now, during the daytime, when people are out and about, maybe that's the time to, you know,
turn it off.
To turn it off, and then maybe if the appliance is efficient that they have, the air conditioning they have is efficient, it should cool down
when they get home
fairly quickly. Yeah. When they get home, and if they've saved, you know, 7 or 8 or 9 hours of usage.
I guess what I'd like people to think about when they're cooling their houses and they don't need it is that in 40 years there won't be a planet left for your grandchildren, and that's very serious.
That is something that we certainly all could identify with. We're going to talk much more about these items and other things when we come back from our public service announcement, and this is a really great discussion.
One more correct answer, and you're the big winner in the Social Security quiz. And here we go. What will the Social Security statement tell you about your retirement? A, the date you should retire. B, how much you can expect your Social Security benefits to be. Or C, what you will owe in taxes.
I know this. I remember getting my Social Security statement in the mail, and I know it's B.
Are you absolutely sure?
Yes, that's my final answer.
Well, you're right. Congratulations.
Retirement planning is not a game. Watch your mail for your Social Security statement and use it to plan your financial future. Remember, Social Security should only be part, not all, of your retirement income. The future is in your hands.
Welcome back to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson, and we have Lynn Tabersack with us, who is the League of Women Voters specialist on climate change here in Connecticut. We were talking about specific appliances and their electric usage. What do computers actually use? Do they take a lot of electricity to run?
They don't take a lot of electricity, but what we tell people is we encourage them to unplug their surge protector so that when they're not using it, there is no power being wasted.
It seems to run kind of parallel with the idea of turning the TV off, because I remember my mom and Dad always used to yell, "Turn that TV off." So it certainly has got to use as much electricity, I would imagine, as maybe not a television from 40 years ago, let's say, but certainly as much for the screen as a modern television. So it's it's of some consequence, obviously, that we turn them off. Because sometimes I've left mine on at night, and my wife Diane has mentioned that to me the next morning. Yeah, the next morning certainly. What about people who are, I guess we would call them deniers that climate change exists? People that don't see enough change in their own mind's eye over the last 5 or 10 years to have it register in that they actually can measure negative changes in what's going on around them. What do we have on both sides of the issue in terms of evidence and strength of argument?
Well, I think science really has come down conclusively and finally on the side of climate change is real. And not only that it's real, the most important thing about climate change is that it's created because of human endeavor. And we're associating it directly with our burning of fossil fuels. So, but for the human element in it, our climate wouldn't be heating up as much as it does. There are people who are climate change deniers, and I don't blame them. I think from Bethel or Danbury, Connecticut, you can't see glaciers melting, you can't see the ice cap shrinking, you don't see any evidence of climate change going on. But our climate is getting warmer, and we look at the things that we're seeing in Connecticut now that tell us that that's true. One of the things that's happening that we have heard about from research done at Avery Point, which is out in Groton, is that our shellfish industry is dying because the clams and the oysters and the mussels that were abundant at one time in Long Island Sound are being smothered by these orange sponge-like creatures called sea squirts that have no value whatsoever. You wouldn't know about that unless they had been doing this research. That's one of the impacts that has already happened in our state, but it's also affected our fishing industry. A lot of the cold water fish are disappearing. Their numbers have been decimated. We talk about flounder, we talk about Atlantic herring, we talk about lobsters, which are no longer a product that we can really count on in terms of providing Connecticut with industry. Interesting thing, poison ivy. Poison ivy loves CO2. It can't get enough carbon dioxide, and some of the research has shown that with higher levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it can grow at like 149% of its usual rate, so that we can look forward to bumper crops of poison ivy. Now, I've seen that.
Ouch, that's something.
I've seen that as I start itching.
That's something that's not attractive to look forward to. Because I'm sure everybody, to some degree, some of us more than others certainly, are allergic to poison ivy, and it's not a fun substance to deal with.
The other things we can look forward to are much more common to the south. We've seen in the northern states this kudzu vine, an invasive Asian vine that you usually see in a movie like Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
But they're capable of, by their weight and their just their growth, of taking out trees, killing everything in its path. That's now in the northern states. Fire ants. I have a son in Georgia. I went walking with him and his family and sat on the ground. I'll never sit on the ground in Georgia again. But we have fire ants, which are not native to this area, that we're now finding in our state. So these are all really impacts of climate change that we see in our own state. So it's real. It's here. We don't see the ice caps melting. We don't see the glaciers melting. But climate change is here. It's warmer. It's serious, and we have to take it seriously.
I've heard some things from people that I know that are in the fishing industry, that they've seen some pretty dramatic things. And of course, at first, the first thought that it was the product of overfishing. But they found that even when they allow periods of time and cut back and allow periods of time for restocking of these fish and crustaceans, that even at that, they never really come back in terms of they don't.
Well, the temperature of the water has risen in Long Island Sound, and it's not good. It's not good. It's climate change, and it's climate change in our area.
Yeah,
but I always like to tell people that climate change isn't a real job killer. If you look at the impact of climate change, if we don't do anything, you see in our future, and this is for the entire planet, you see famine, you see droughts, you see sea level rises that create these mass migrations that we have never seen before, because people are actually driven out of where they live, the most populous areas around the coast. You're going to see crop failures. You're going to see larger deserts. And these are things that really kill any economy. I can't imagine an economy surviving with all of these adverse climate conditions going on. I think people like to think that we're the United States. We're an industrialized nation. We don't have to worry about Southeast Asia or Africa or any of the India or any of those countries, that we can create an island to ourselves. And that's absolutely not true, because you will have also the possibility of really violent conflicts and wars over basic things of land, of water, and of energy that people, we haven't seen nothing yet. Iraq is just a blip on the horizon.
But isn't there a very noticeable, very obvious plus side to all this, particularly here in Connecticut, where we have our helicopter industry and our industries that are very technical and machine oriented in nature, because we have the opportunity perhaps to be in on the ground floor of building wind turbines, and doesn't this kind of, if not at least counterbalance the loss of jobs in other areas, in other industries? Doesn't that even kind of give us an opportunity to be at the vanguard of new industries, new energy industries that can make us one of the wealthier states in America.
I think that that climate change can also create opportunities, and that's opportunities for business. It's also opportunities for people to have jobs. I think within a stone's throw of this broadcast station, we have one of the state's most successful fuel cell developers.
Fuel cell, yeah.
Fuel cells don't emit any greenhouse gases, and people might be fascinated to know that there are fuel cells. There's a strong industry in our state, but there are fuel cells that are powering St. Francis Hospital. There are fuel cells powering the Yale Peabody Museum, South Windsor High School, Middletown High School, Pepperidge Farms in Fairfield, all being powered not off of the grid, but through this fuel cell technology.
Now that's a little different than solar paneling.
Yep, solar is another area where Connecticut is in the vanguard. We have had the vision through the Clean Energy Fund to offer rebates, for instance, for homeowners who opt to put photovoltaic solar panels on their roofs. And Connecticut's a good state. Except for this spring, the sun usually shines strongly. Even in the winter months, we can generate power from our solar panels. But there have been 529 rebates handed out to homeowners from our Clean Energy Fund as rebates for installing these photovoltaic panels. It's a growth industry. It's very robust. And the thing is that it not only does it create many times hot water for these residential households, or electricity, or both, but it lowers their electric utility bill. Now, who wouldn't want to see their electric bill go down? So we have a clean energy fund that has been created by a tiny little surcharge on your electric bill that is willing to finance renewable energy in public places, in schools, at municipalities, and we're eligible for all that kind of funding, and that will help our towns and cities be greener, which will help our state be greener. So
I've seen that charge, and I can't even think of it's so small I can't even recall how much it is, but I've been seeing it for a number of years. But now, if businesses and perhaps even homeowners are able to generate, and it doesn't seem to be very, very difficult to do, to generate more electricity than they're actually using, I understand the Connecticut Light and Power or energy utilities is obligated to buy it back. So you're not only supplying for yourself then.
You become a power generator, and your meter will actually go in reverse.
Wow, that's really...
that we live to see that.
Are there any things we haven't touched on as far as what we can do as individuals?
Well, it's not what we can do as individuals, it's actually what we can do as a nation, what we can do as a state. Connecticut's been terrific on climate change, but only in terms of power generators, power plants. We don't have that many. I think we have 36.
Yeah.
We have to tackle the whole issue of transportation, of tailpipe emissions, of having more people choose to buy more fuel-efficient cars, hybrid cars, of using what I call low-carbon fuels, both for heating our home heating oil and our motor vehicle oil. We need more support for public transportation.
We're going to have to wrap it up there because we've run out of time, but we'll have you back soon to talk about more of this important subject matter.
I'd be glad to come.
Thank you very much, Lynn. This is David Stevenson. I'm tonight's host. This is Lynn Tabersack, League of Women Voters. She specializes in looking at global climate change and how it affects Connecticut. Thanks, Lynn.
Oh, you're quite welcome.